The first is going to be KnowBe4. I'm only going to touch on this slightly. KnowBe4 should be on screen at the moment. It's just a web page. I don't have much to show in it, but KnowBe4 itself is a real industry-leading training tool, and we use it in Somerford. And I got an example of a phishing test the other day. So our security boss will send out his own phishing campaigns. So he sends us all emails that look legit. They all look genuine. We've got various things in our email where we can like mouse over and instantly see if a link is valid, a threat hidden, etc. But he sends out all these emails to all staff to see how many are going to fall for clicking it, to identify weaknesses, to identify, you know, the potential risk of users out there. He gets reports on that. We get told. We have a thing called Phish Alert in our email, where if we suspect that an email is dodgy, we can click that Phish Alert and it will report back to him to say whether or not, you know, what our intentions are with this email. So I got one that was absolutely legitimate. I clicked that button and he came back to me very quickly saying, no, that is a legitimate email. You're fine to click that link. Or he'll come back and he'll say, yeah, that's dodgy. Let's not be clicking that. But as part of the KnowBe4, he'll send out these campaigns. He gets reports back. We get told how many in the team, for example, fell for it, how many didn't. He's able to put his own training into this KnowBe4 as well. So we get company training like GDPR and so on, courses that we have to do. The videos are great. I mean, they're very high production value. They cover a wide range of topics. I've been through so many of these courses with so many companies, and they tend to be very boring. But these are done like, you know, drama serials with a narrative. About 13 episodes is the last one, just short videos, 5 to about 7 minutes long. And they were absolutely fantastic. And they cover a huge, broad range of topics and gave you it in a way that it was real world. It showed you how such an attack could be performed, what it would look like, what to do, and the real use case of it if you fell for it, what would actually happen. So they were really, really informative that way. So KnowBe4 for me is really the first line of defense in a phishing attack, and most security issues when it comes to an end user, because you definitely want to have them trained up as well as possible in identifying them, but also what action to take if you think you have fallen for it is a big thing. So I'm not going to touch on this too much. That will do for KnowBe4. The first thing we're going to look at is what is the structure of a phishing email. You're going to get probably a coded email written in like HTML that looks like an official Microsoft Office warning. There's always a sense of urgency to the email. It'll be something like your account is going to expire. The ones you get are HMRC, you're due a refund, people are going to fall for that. The parcel ones are, oh, we tried to deliver a parcel, it's now going back to the supplier unless you contact us. There's always a sense of urgency to it. They try to make them look as genuine as possible, but the links themselves are never going to be genuine. You know, it's never going to be a genuine Microsoft email with a genuine Microsoft link in it. So obviously the links are what we want to look at today. I have seen though that one of the phishing attempts that were made against me, it was a Google Drive account. So it was where they'd stored something on a Google Drive account that's probably going to be launching HTML or triggering a download or something like that. That if you've got a secure web gateway, if you've got a tool that allows Google Drive, then that link probably would have opened for me if I clicked it, regardless of what I did security-wise, unless it's been caught by the various ways that these security risks are updated and so on. But we're going to touch on that. So I've got 5 links here that all have security risks associated with them. Now, whether these security risks are real or not, for example, this one is just uncategorized. Is that a security risk? But we're going to go through each of these in a Netskope tenant, and I've got the Netskope tenant open here. So Netskope itself is it's hard to quantify what it is. I would say it's a SASE tool now more than anything. So think a secure web gateway, we're going to block access to websites based on categories and URL. It's also a CASB where we're going to control what users can do inside of cloud applications, like give them various permissions, like maybe block an upload or block download if they're using Office, create like a least privileged environment for our users. Remember that all of these things are hosted off-site cloud apps. So you used to have everything in an office. You would have to go into the office, sit down at a desk, and log on to like an application that was sitting on a server in a data center. You could only get to it if you were inside the four walls of the security inside the firewall. Well, everything is practically cloud now, so you can get to them from anywhere in the world. You can sign up for anything, for guest accounts. That you really need to be careful across the entire attack plane, across every single vector there is for data exfiltration and so on. And that Netskope's capturing as much of that as possible, and all the time they're improving it. We've got DLP protection in here. We've got API enabled protection, which is where it can actually like build right into Google Drive or Office and so on, and have visibility and controls that go on inside these applications. We've got things like reverse proxy, where you don't even need a Netscope client running on it and it's still protecting your apps. We've got cloud firewall, we've got email protection. There's just tons goes on in this thing. That it was originally I was calling it a next gen secure web gateway, but it's definitely way beyond that now. In the years that I've worked with it, there's so much going on under the hood of this thing. So this is what the tenant looks like. Because it's been designed from the ground up for the cloud, it's very easy to use, very intuitive. I mean, it takes me like 10 minutes to put in a baseline. Don't tell the PS people that, because obviously 10 minutes is very quick. Could you bill a full day for 10 minutes? But there's way more to it. You have to be working out like what is a company's baseline, workshopping it, and so on. But the actual config of these things are really, really straightforward. We're looking at the policy page at the moment. I've developed a bunch of policies to show today. We're going to just enable and disable them one at a time, just to show the workings and how these examples are going to protect against phishing. On this particular machine, I have the client running. So this at the moment is capturing all of my web traffic. You can set bypasses, you can set various rules to say don't send this particular web traffic. For example, I don't send my banking information in Somerford, any user's banking information up to Netscope. It goes direct to the banking website if you go to one. But all other web traffic goes to Netskope to be checked. Inside of this, in the secure web gateway side of things, where we do our custom categories and our URL lists, we do have this URL lookup section, and it's invaluable to me when I'm working with Netskope, where I take one of these URLs, like this bench3.com as an example, I bug it into that, I hit enter, and I can see what's the site name, what's happening to it. It's being steered to Netskope. So if anyone goes to this URL, they are going to go through Netskope. And then I see what categories that it's classed as by Netskope. So when you see predefined, that is what Netskope categorized it as. And then we've got the ones that I've created where that is captured under. So you can see it's captured under one I've created for all categories, because that's got part domains in it. Then I've got these special ones that I've made just for today. Then I've got, it would tell me the policies at the bottom here that the specific URL is used in, but because I'm not listing it in any specific URLs, we're not seeing the policy down here. Also, because the policies are disabled, they're not going to show up here as well until I enable them. We do have this report miscategorization here. Sometimes you will have to do that. I mean, they're very quick at coming back on it. I think it's a 24-hour team, because I get a response within about 20 minutes to 30 minutes every time I do one. These are helpful. So for example, our marketing team, there will be events that are like pop-up events for tech companies and so on. They'll have their own website. The website is only going to be there for registration, then it's getting binned after the event is over. So it's only going to exist for 3 months. So it'll probably show up as uncategorized. We've got rules inside the Somerford that block uncategorized. So marketing will come to me and say that this is badged incorrectly. I take a quick look at it, see that it's definitely a legit website, check who is and so on. Then I hit that button, and you literally just put in what category do you think it is. I'll click it and we'll see what it looks like. So if I was doing this bench3.com, it's classed as part domains. I remove all of these categories. I put in what I think it should be. I put in any comments that will support what I've asked for, and they come back to me saying yes or no. So 100% of the time they said yes, but I did see one with a customer where it was, they were trying to get the security flag removed from a URL, and it was definitely a phishing site. They had evidence it was a phishing site. So they were not going to remove that for the customer, because obviously it's a huge risk. So we've looked at our URLs. I've done that for each of these. This top one I'm categorized. We've got part domain, phishing, compromised. if we think of a phishing attack, remember the URL is probably going to be temporary. It's probably going to be spun up. It's not going to exist for long before it's caught as being a security risk by the various sources that work these things out. One of them, which I'll show, is abuse.ch. If you don't use it, this website is invaluable. They give you various dumps and things every single day that you can take and put into your security tools to update them with URLs, IPs, etc., where all these threats are coming from, detection patterns and things like that. So if you don't use this, use this. It's definitely invaluable. So Netskope use that as one of their sources, but there's a variety of things that they use as well to justify what is a threat and what isn't. And inside of their categories, if I hit new and web access, and then we go to category here, because we're doing a web-based policy, and I scroll down to security, the number of topics that they've got under their security is immense. So we've got ad fraud, attack, botnets, command and control, all the way down. We have a dedicated phishing and fraud one, spyware, spam sites, etc. So when I go to a company, they tend to only focus on acceptable use. So they want to be blocking the usual things that companies block, like adult sites and gambling and so on, trying to put in an acceptable use policy. Well, you should have a risky policy as well. And I just tend to tick all the risky ones in here, like uncategorized, newly registered, all these security risk ones. What else have we got in here? There's one, part domains, etc., no content, all of those types of categories I put into there. Then we've got our blanket policy very quickly. We've got all our acceptable use ones. We've got all our risky ones are all ticked. Then you create exceptions for these based upon user need. So I'm not going to allow you access to an uncategorized website unless you come back to me and say, yeah, this is legit. In the same way the marketing team example that I gave earlier, and it takes like minutes to go in and create a custom category or a custom URL list. We're going to see that in a moment. But I get a call from like a Somerford staff member, and they will be back online within minutes. That's how easy it is to use this tool. So we're going to look at our first one, which is the risky categories one here. So number one, phishing, risky categories. Sorry, you'll see my mouse doing weird things. I keep having to move this little control panel for the meeting. I'm just going to move that over there, and I'm just going to turn this policy back on. Apply my changes. It will now say syncing. And the minute that green bar for syncing disappears, I haven't logged into this for a while. I thought I was going to get kicked out there. But successfully submitted changes, now syncing policies. And once that vanishes, that's our policy now back online. So if I was to go and use this on the VM, we would see that these sites are blocked. But if we just walk through the policy for a moment, I'm using a single user for this one, but if you leave that blank, it chooses any. We get various options in here. Like we can do it based on group, we can do it based on OU, we can do it if the user is unknown, so that if they are not registered in Netskope, but they've got a Netskope client running, then the policy would still take effect. There's various other ways we can do this when they've not got a client running. We've got add criteria. We could do it from the country they're coming from. We could do it based on the internal UBA score, the OS, the browser. If we want to stop people using IE, we can stop people using IE across our company by blocking everything IE for the browser, how they're getting into the app and so on. I've chosen category. I've created my own custom category called phishing risky categories, which we'll take a look at. I'm saying any activity, anything at all for one of these sites. So we're saying even if the user goes to it, they're going to be blocked. We're going to go into the granular control of activities in just a moment. But we block it. We can customize all the templates, all the notifications the users get. So we want to educate our users as much as possible. There's no point just saying this site is blocked, because users tend to try and find a way around it, particularly when that urgency is in place. So they've got to get a document to someone by a certain time of that day. You're blocking lead transfer, and it's the easiest way for them to get that document to someone. They will try and find a way around it to solve their immediate problem. But if we coach them and say, no, you can use Office 365, just upload it to OneDrive and click share and give the user the link and so on. We can even take them straight there if we want to in Netskope. We can redirect them immediately once they've read that and said okay. So we can fully customize any alert in this based on the policy that's triggered and so on. And we just give it a name. There's various other things we can do, like set alarms and things like that, but I never do that. I'm going to go through Splunk in a moment. The options are there. So I'm going to jump back into the website of things. We're going to look at our custom category. So all I've done is I've ticked all the weird ones to me. So all the security ones, the uncategorized, the unreachables, the newly registered, newly observed, that's a new one. Miscellaneous, no content, all those types of things. I can add more if I want, just by very quickly scrolling down through this and ticking them, adding them to the top one. But I also have these custom URL lists here, and I've got an include one and I've got an exclude one. So because our policy is a block policy, anything we add to this include is going to be blocked. So even if it doesn't exist in one of these categories, if we put the URL into this, it's going to be blocked. And if we put the URL into this, it's not going to be blocked. And our URL lists are just sitting here under URL lists. We've got phishing risky categories exclude. I did add that as a placeholder because you can't create an empty one. But that's an example. You just put your URLs into there. Now, this is invaluable for, say you've got a security team or a SOC, and they do go around and get all these risky URLs and they get all these downloads of feeds of dodgy URLs and so on. They can update these using an API call. So once they get that feed, they can literally run a script that will update Netskope on the fly over an API call. They don't need to log in and constantly have to manually update this. You could create them a policy, put that right at the top of your policy list so that it says, if a user ever tries to go to one of these URLs, they are blocked before they hit any other policy. And it can all be automated. It can all work quite well, because you can end up with thousands upon thousands of URLs need to be blocked once you start pulling from all these different sources of feeds and things. So definitely look into the automation of that. But again, the logic is simple. I've called that exclude, I've called that include. So if a user was to come to me right now and say, I am blocked from X, and I see that it's this policy that's blocking it, I look at it and it's legit, then I'm literally coming into this URL list. I'm going into exclude and I'm putting the URL in there, and within a minute that user will be back online. That's how easy it is to do this. So now that we've turned on our policy and we're blocking all the risky ones, let's take our dodgy ones. So I'll take this bench 3 one since it's highlighted. We open up our Chrome. And I try to go to bench3.com. Now, I will say before we start, this is a very small VM I'm on, and the longer I'm on it, the more slow it will get. So over time, this might die. But for that, and especially using Chrome on it, well, you can see that we've been stopped. I've created the alert to say this may be a phishing attempt, do not proceed. So because that was one of our dodgy categories, it has been blocked by our dodgy list, and therefore we can no longer get to this website. That is one of the easiest ways that you can stop phishing in a company, because most of the URLs that come in a phishing email are going to fall into one of the categories that I have chosen on this, which means that the user, as long as they've got the Netskope client running on their machine, even if they click the link, they are never going to get to it. They're never going to be able to put their credentials into the fake page. So therefore, we've stopped phishing for our company. However, some of these URLs can get around this because they tried to hide them behind legitimate things. So the example I gave earlier of the company that were trying to get the security flag removed from a website, it was, on the surface of it, looked like a legitimate website. I've seen it as well where it was a housing company. It was an Indian housing company. If you went to it, you were able to browse around various properties and see properties for sale and so on. But behind the scenes of that domain, it was being used for phishing. So it looks legit up front. And if you check the category of it, you might find for a time that that is classed as a housing website, until it eventually gets caught that it's a phishing site, and then it gets rebadged that this is a phishing site, this is dodgy. So therefore, blocking in this way isn't going to stop all phishing, but it is one of the easiest and one of the most successful ways to do it, because the majority of phishing is easy. That's why people do it, right? So you don't need any coding knowledge and things. I could phish a company if I wanted to, and I'm not any kind of hacker or anything like that. It's pretty easy to do. So, and with it being a blanket catch-all type system is not a lot of thought goes into all the ways of making it successful for a number of the phishing emails out there, that most of them are going to fall under one of these uncategorized, etc. But it's those niche cases, those special cases that you need to watch for. So that's us. We've stopped phishing. Great. But now let's stop it in a different way that should stop all phishing. So I'm just going to disable this one so that it's only our next policy that we're looking at. Now we're going to move into the activity-based type of blocking that you can do inside of a next-gen secure web gateway or a CASB, both of which are Netskope. Activity-based is where, imagine that in we'll call it a legacy secure web gateway, it was essentially a firewall. So you've got a source as the user, they are trying to go to a destination, it checks a policy, it sees whether they're allowed to, and it either allows or denies. And it is purely the visiting of that site, it's the connection to that site that is being blocked. But in this day and age, that's not good enough. With the way that the internet works, you need to be reading the code of the page. You need to be reading the code of what the user's trying to do when they interact with that site or application. Because if you want to go down the secure web gateway route these days, you would end up blocking off half the internet purely on a block or allow process. You would end up with huge, crazy rules inside of it, thousands of complexity and so on. Imagine that you're a company and you use Zoom. So Zoom is your chosen, sanctioned meeting tool. Well, you're going to have customers, you're going to have suppliers and things that don't use Zoom, and they want to set up a meeting in Teams. So if you only allow Zoom and you block Teams, then you can't interact with that company on their chosen tool. So now you have to create a rule to allow Teams, but limit the usage of Teams to certain things so that a user can't exfiltrate. And you know, it builds to this huge complexity with the way that the world works. So we have just created, in fact, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So we've created a policy here that for every single website, every single form of web activity out there, we are going to block logins. And again, we block it. We've got a custom template here. We've got a name and so on. I will cancel out this. I will enable this. We let that sync. Sorry, I need to hit apply changes. So we let that sync. And once that is synced, we can go back to our VM and then we can attempt a login. There we go. That's synced. I'll get rid of my risky sites. I'll get rid of my client. We'll get rid of this folder. We'll open up Chrome. Where can we log into? What have I got here? Let's try Box. Box is a simple login screen. So I'm going to pop in a username there. Might be a bit iffy because it's using Google. So we'll try it anyway. And there we go. So the minute I try to log into Box, now I'm blocked. So again, if a user is given a website and a fake phishing email that has a username and password box on it, any method of posting data, like a username is looking specifically for you logging in that way, it's going to block it. And you can see I can't do anything now because I tried to sign into something. It's never going to let me log into anything ever again. But that creates a problem because there are legitimate things out there that we have to log into. And that is why I've created this policy here, which I'm going to enable. And you can see in here, we're using a CASB policy, so it's specific cloud applications. We've got Microsoft Live accounts. That's like when you're using one of these application suites, you tend to go through their own IDP. So if you're going to Microsoft, you'll log into their account side of things first. Then it puts you where you were wanting to go, like Outlook or OneDrive. Same with Google, you sign into Google. Then you can go to Gmail, then you can go to Drive, but you're not signing into Gmail and Drive, you're signing into Google first. Same with Microsoft, you're signing into Microsoft Live first, then you're going to Outlook, then you're going to OneDrive. But we've given the login attempt as an allow one on this to say that we want our users using these. They would obviously tend to be Office 365, but I don't have a company account for Office 365 that I can show it with. So I'm using the live ones, essentially the personal ones. So if we come back to our Chrome now, and we go to, did I save it? I did not. So let's go to live.com. We click sign in this time. Again, we pop in. Has it saved it? No, it's not. So I need to remember my username. Pop in password. Stay signed in. So I've passed the sign in point. I'm in. So this is where we're now. What are the, we're thinking, what are the sanctioned applications that our users use? What are the websites they should be logging into? And we would want to create policies to allow logins only for them. So we shouldn't be logging into anything else. So only for the things that we know about and we want our users using. We call them sanctioned. So for our sanctioned applications, we want our users to be able to log into them. But for everything else, we block. So now, if one of those phishing emails comes through and it's from a non-legit, something we haven't allowed, they are not going to be able to log into it. So they're not going to be able to pass their credentials to the attacker as they physically can't. We've not blocked everything though, like we did with the last policy. We've only blocked that individual activity. So with a combination of those two policies, I think phishing would be gone. I can't say that because if I say that and a company does get phished and they had these types of policies, obviously I'm misleading. I do have a feeling phishing would be gone if you had it set up that you can only log into your legitimate websites, your legitimate applications and logins. We're not blocking the internet, remember? We can still visit box.com. So say they get a public link sent to them by a Box user that they have to download, and it's legit, we've got threat protection enabled, because this can do threat protection as well. Most secure web gateways can, but if that is a legit application or file that they've downloaded, they can still get to Box, so they can still interact with that supplier, but we're just not going to let them log into Box. And there's another side to that. It's another way that phishing can happen, and it is compromised credentials. And if you look at this, I could go to, let's go to Box. Most of these companies, these cloud companies, it's an old saying on the internet is if something's free, then it's you that's the product. They will give you a free service on it, but they're farming your data, or they're trying to force you to upsell, to buy the package, the premium package and so on, but most companies will let you sign up. So if a user's going out there and they're signing up for all these things with their company email, they will probably also be using the actual password that they use for that company email or that user account. Then when you get breaches, those credentials are now known. Netskope has under their URLs, UBA, I'm obsessed with URLs, they have methods of checking for compromised credentials. So they get feeds of all the dumps they can find of usernames and passwords on the internet. I don't have any on this. This is a test tenant, okay? But in a production estate, you do begin to see them. You do begin to see people using personal accounts to log into things like Live and Google and so on, and it will check. So it's not an exact match. It's like within a certain certainty that username has been compromised. But you will get a list in here showing that people are using their credentials on websites that you should definitely not be using your credentials on. They'll be using them on dating sites, they'll be using them on gambling sites, they'll be using them all kinds of places. It's the equivalent of, I don't know if you've ever been to it, have I been owned? This website is one of the feeds, I believe, that Netskope uses as well. They've got an API call going to this that pulls in these types of things as well. But if we pop an email in here, like Netskope demo at workshop.somerford.co, so that account's never been breached. But if I put my personal one in here, it will say yes, it's been breached about 8 times on sites that I've used. So that's the type of thing as well. You don't want your people using their company account to register for things that are not sanctioned company things. And you can block that as well. So we've got what's called a constraint If I come down here, I've got constraint. You can see I've created a couple here. Matches that domain or doesn't match that domain. So now we can build. I'm not going to do it. We're 35 minutes in. It will take too long to actually implement this. But if you think of it that I am using the personal live account here, I'm using a personal side, a free service from Microsoft to show this particular case. Well, what if I'm using, like, you know, Google Drive? Google Drive allows you to register as a business, and it allows you to register as a personal user. For the business side of Microsoft, it's Office 365. Some companies do use Live. They don't actually pay for the Office 365. They don't have that full enterprise setup. But with Google, it's both. So Google Drive is used for both corporate and personal. That if I allow Google Drive in my next-gen secure web gateway, what stops a user logging in with a personal account? So when it comes to data exfiltration, if all my policies block everything except Google Drive because we trust it, then if I can just sign out of Google Drive, you don't even need to sign out. You can sign in like with more than one account at one time in Google Drive now. So I could sign in with a personal account, and I could be stealing all the data because I'm leaving and just uploading it all to my personal account. So now we could build a policy that says we'll only allow the login to Google Drive if they're using a company email, and if they're not, block it. So now we've stopped that personal use as well. But we're veering off of the phishing thing as we go down that avenue. So there's an example. So this one here, this top one, just to recap, we've blocked all the risky categories. The user can't even load the page. This one, we're blocking everything from login except for things that we want to use. And that, to me, would stop phishing. However, I'm not guaranteeing it. If we now move on to, well, what if we don't have a Netskope client? Because remember, we can log into these things from anywhere. So we can go to a website, say, I mean, you can set up access lists like URL lists, IP trusting and all that, and things like Office 365. But say I'm working at home and I tried to go to that live and I have issues with it. I can't log into it, or the customers come to me and they've said, oh, we need you to send us something over WeTransfer, but I've set up rules of WeTransfer, and I'm trying to find a way around Netskope because it's a Netskope client doing all the blocking. How do you implement client list controls for a user? Well, that is reverse proxy. Reverse proxy means we don't need the client. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to my client, I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to disable it. So this machine essentially has no controls at all right now. It is just a blank slate for the internet right now. I don't even have any policies turned on except this, right? But it's a blank slate. We can do what we want, but now we have this policy here for reverse proxy. Reverse proxy is where you can see that I've implemented reverse proxy with Google Drive, and I'm saying that if I access Google Drive via reverse proxy, we're going to block it, but only if I download and upload. I can do everything else, but if I try and download and upload, then I'm going to be blocked. So let's do that. Let's come to our Chrome, go to Google Drive. We will sign in. I will pop in my password for this account. So you notice that we're using Okta here. So I mentioned before about MFA, that MFA is not a guarantee you won't be phished, because if a user falls for both steps, the username and password and the phishing attempt, then the attacker's got everything. Now, most tokens will be time sensitive. That's why if I was phishing, I would script it that the minute I get a hit on a token, that I automatically log into as many services with that token, username and password. I could set that up, and I'm not a coder. Just launch a web page, authenticate to it using those details, using something like Auto IT when I'm looking for the username and password field, because I know what your sites are, so I could get the tags for those fields, input those values and log into something, and then I'm in. And once I'm in, I tend not to get kicked out. So I would get an alert saying someone's fallen for it, I can now come to my machine and start doing what I want to do. So MFA is needed in this day and age because you definitely don't want a public-facing service with just a username and password on it as protection. At the very minimum, you want it with something like Okta in there to control it and control all your users from a single sign-in point of view and so on. I'm going to log into this if I haven't timed out yet, because I talked for a bit there. And we can see that we're into Google Drive. Now, it looks exactly the same as Google Drive, but it's not. There is one slight difference on screen that you would have to have sharp eyes to catch, and that is this URL up here. So drive.google.com now ends with rproxy.ghostscope.com, which is the typical Netskope domain. So what just happened? We went to Google Drive, we clicked to sign in, and we got an Okta prompt. We would get the Okta prompt whether the client is running or not. But because the Okta has established we are not coming from, so we've built it into the SAML assertion and so on, that it knows I don't have a client running. So it's going to hand me over to Netskope once it validates me. Then Netskope essentially tells Google Drive I am who I am. Google Drive lets me in, but we're proxied, reverse proxy, we're proxied through Netskope. So it's equivalent of me having a client running right now, but I don't have a client running, which means that if I come here, I shouldn't click new folder because I've got this panel in the way, couldn't see what I was clicking. So file uploads, and let's just upload our risky sites. So we want to put our risky sites in. And you can see that we got an upload failure. So we're not going to get the typical Netskope prompts that we saw earlier, where it said access denied, this might be a phishing attempt and so on, because that's really driven by the client. It handles the alerting and so on when we're blocked. But because we've got no client running, it's actually the application is unable to get the file. So it's a failure and it's a break in the process for me uploading to this. So Google Drive knows that I'm trying to upload. Netskope is blocking it. So therefore Google Drive is like, hang on, that upload just failed, and I get a failure. And if I try and download, the same will happen, but I can still go around, I can still open things, I can still view things, etc. So if we wanted to create a least privileged environment in our application, if someone was phished, or if we had contractors even, that we want to limit what they can do in our Google Drive, then we can create this reverse proxy. Because a contractor, highly likely, they won't allow your client, your Netskope client, to be installed on the machine. So we could give them a reverse proxy as well. But from a phishing point of view, a user who has been phished probably has a client on the machine. The phisher does not. So therefore, they will never be logging into this with a client running. Hence, they would always be coming in as reverse proxy, that we could essentially just block this completely and say, don't allow access to Google Drive if you're not coming from a client machine. They do have various things inside of Netskope, which I'll touch on very quickly, because there are some catches to that. There's some ways that are probably going through your mind right now. But what about if they did get a client on the machine? They're using a compromised machine, etc. If we come into here and we go into manage, we can create device classifications. So I've got one here to say that if the device is domain joined, we trust it. If it's not domain joined, we don't. We can build our policies for managed and unmanaged devices. There is a thing, enforcement, but I can never remember what menu it is in. So give me a second. It's not going to be in threat protection. Is it in manage? Administration. Did I skip right over it? Was it tools? No. I don't want you sitting here while I go through every menu. It must be in here somewhere. Enforcement. Yeah, I just skipped over it. Enforcement is where when they're detected logging into something and they don't have a client running and you've integrated like Okta and SSO and so on with that application, you can force them to download. They will be taken to a download page for the client, and they can only proceed if they install the client and they're a valid user and everything like that. So you could put all of that type of stuff in to stop that, to put on an extra layer of security. But that's, again, the phishing side of it. What we've looked at, if we come back to our policies, is we've looked at One, we're going to block the user if they've got a client running going to any of our risky sites. Two, we're going to block logins to anything we don't trust, but we're going to allow logins to things we do. Now we're saying if a user is compromised, say they forward the phishing email to a personal machine with no client running, then they try and log into it. Now they've given away their credentials. Now an attacker could log into our Google Drive with their username and password, maybe their MFA token if they went that far, but we can still control what they're doing when they're in there. So we know they're coming from a machine without a client, so we can block everything or limit them uploading, limit them downloading. Now I'm going to turn off this policy. We've got 14 minutes left, so let's go very, very quickly here. I mentioned before about integrating Netskope with applications directly. We have that. We've got the API data protection here, which is where this is an API-driven process, so it's after the fact. If I upload something to Google Drive, then it's going to call it out. It's going to tell me that something's been uploaded, but it's also going to check it. It's going to check it against these particular policies, looking for GDPR and so on that one. It's also going to do threat protection as standard. So if I upload malware, so if I come here, I'm going to turn my client back on. I'm going to sign out of this. I'm going to move this panel out the way. Sign out of this to kill the reverse proxy connection. Turn my client back on. Just like that. Once it colors in, it means it's on. Gray means off. So there, it's on. I'll come back to my Google Drive. I need to sign all the way back into it. We'll see 3 minutes on this and then 10 minutes to end. So we're back into here. I will now upload, but I'm going to upload a file that I know for a fact has got malware in it. It's this malware docx. So let's re-upload this. And I'll say keep both files. So I'll call it like 2. It puts a 1 in it. So there we go. That is uploaded fine now. Because we're on the client, no longer going through reverse proxy. We've got that permission. We are all good. I'll just close off my Google Drive. We come back to here, and because we've got the API-enabled protection, if I come into Google Drive and I check this, you can see that over time, it hasn't called out the malware I just uploaded yet, because remember, it's after the fact, it's not real time. So when I uploaded that, it triggered a log event inside the Google Drive to say a file has now been uploaded. That log event came to Netskope. Netskope then goes and logs into Google Drive via an API call and checks that file for malware and so on. It is not instant. It does take a minute or so, depending on the application, for that process to take place. But if I come into these malware files now, I can see all the malware that I've uploaded over time inside of Netskope being called out. And if I come back to our alerts and come into these alerts, I should at some point, I'm hoping it's already happened, but I should at some point see, I can see I've been blocked for the reverse proxy. But while we're in here, let's just talk very quickly about the activity side of things. So I begin to see everything my users are up to. So these are all mainly blocks, alerts and so on. Here's an example from yesterday when I was just doing a quick run through this. You can see the malware introspection means it's went and checked via an API call, and you can see it's detected that that file had malware in it. It was that malware.docx. It tells you what the actual malware was that was triggered in it. That if we did get phished and they were uploading like crypto lockers and things like that, and they were getting flagged as malicious files in our Google Drive, we're going to get told about it. If they were now trying to propagate that, we're going to know. But we would want to stop them getting to that in the first place by using reverse proxy, locking the attacker from doing so, but we're going to see it. Now, the next thing as well, I'm going to touch on very, very quickly, is private access. So private access, I mentioned before that the credentials can be used anywhere. We could be using the credentials for RDP, for SSH. I'm just going to very quickly, I won't bother showing this as an example because we've only got 10 minutes left. But imagine that I have got a publisher running. So this is a Netskope publisher. You download this straight from the AWS Marketplace or Azure Marketplace, or you can build them yourselves. They give you the OVA files. You can put as many of these in as you want. And they act as proxies within your bubble. So within my secure bubble, which is AWS here, I have a publisher sitting. The publisher itself talks to my tenant securely, but it also talks to my resources. So my publisher has a firewall rule that allows it to contact these servers, and these servers only. Can't talk to anything else. It can only talk to these 3 servers. So I've got a client running on my machine. I'm just going to very quickly jump into policies. So I've got a client running on my machine. And for me to get to those servers via RDP or SSH, because they're in the secure bubble, previously we would have said the user has to be on a VPN. And there'll be some trust between the VPN and these boxes. So I can't just fire up an RDP session and go to them. I had to connect to the VPN first, and then I RDP or SSH. However, because we've already got the Netskope client running here, and that is talking to my tenant securely, and we've got this publisher here that's talking to my tenant securely, and this publisher can talk to these boxes, then I, via a policy, which I'll jump into here, it isn't enabled, but this demo private access, because it's applied to any user, I have a secure connection all the way from my machine. It's always on, so it's like an always on VPN, think of it that way, on my connection, that I could open up this, if I turned on that policy, and I could RDP straight to that device. But I'm actually going through Netskope for it. And if I come into my network events here, let that load. Have I got it set to 24 hours? No, I don't. You can see that I've been connecting to various private applications. There's the RDP session there. All of these, they're DNS calls for LastPass, and this is the web activity to LastPass. So if there's certain things that are internal, like internal applications, like timesheet tools and so on, you could create a trusted connection to them. But for the RDP and the SSH side, if I got phished and those credentials could be used to get to various things, then put those things under a secure layer like this as well. That means that I can't get to it. Now, you tend to do that with a VPN, but most of the VPNs I've been given by a company use the exact same username and password as my email. I log on with it because it's single sign-on everywhere, that if you know one, you know them all. Well, this one, you have to have the client running on the machine and have the policy set up to allow you to get the connection there, which means that the attacker can't, because they don't have the client. There's no way to get the client installed correctly, to be managed and controlled and so on. That you've blocked another layer of attack. That zero trust network access kind of SASE side of it, that we can't do it. Now, if I, what should we end on? We'll end on Splunk. Now that we've got feeds of this information, going back to what I said at the very start of the call, which was users will not tell you if they've been phished 9 times out of 10. Because A, they don't know it's happened, or B, they don't want to tell you because they think they're going to get fired. So if I log into Splunk here, Netskope have an app and add-on that they built, which is fantastic. If I go into the add-on here, very easy to configure. You literally put in the address of your tenant. Inside of your tenant, you can get a token. You put that in, and then you just tell it what you want to connect. So you can see I'm connecting to that, and behind the scenes of this are a token. If I go in and edit it, if I go to my inputs, you can see I'm pulling in everything. So down on the left here, we're pulling in web, we're pulling in client information, we're pulling in all the alerts, and we're pulling in all the admin events on the tenant. They give you an app as well with a bunch of out-of-the-box dashboards, which are very helpful. I tend not to use out-of-the-box dashboards and things. They are helpful, but it's usually customers have got a very niche thing they want to look at, that I tend to build my own dashboards in Splunk for the customer. But there's great information in here, and there's tons of it. You begin to see everything summarized as to what the users are up to. You can look at application events, network events, the alerts, your infrastructure as a whole. This one, we're looking now going into the fine detail of things that are getting used. I mean, there's tons of stuff to choose from here. I'm not even going to let that load because we're at 5 minutes left. So you've got the app, you've got the add-on, you begin to get huge amounts of visibility. Inside of Netskope, this Scope IT screen, you can do little custom style scripts in here to search for specific things, or you can use the drop-down filters. You do get reporting. I don't have reporting in the test tenant because we've got the advanced analytics set up. But you would see if you didn't have the advanced analytics set up, it would just say reports here. You can build your own reports. I tend to do all of mine in Splunk. I tend to do all the searching and alerting and stuff like that in a CM tool. If I come back out and go to search, and then I've built my dashboard in search, not the Netskope app. So I go into dashboards and I go into my Netskope alerts. I just built some very quick dashboards yesterday just to show the demo that we've looked at today and the types of things you could be looking at. So we've got at the top here the malware that was detected inside of Google Drive. So you can see I've got the malware detected here, what the file was, etc. The reverse proxy usage, I can see that people are logging in via reverse proxy. So we know our users shouldn't be ever doing that. And this is a good sign someone's been phished because they're coming in from a machine that doesn't have a client running on it. But I've also added this country column here from the event, because if it say we know all our users, I mean we've got international users in Somerford. I know what countries they're in. So if I saw a country that wasn't one of our known ones, like say it showed up here as like, I don't know, India, China, then I know I've got an issue. If someone is logging into my Google Drive and they're getting in from China, I know there's a big problem there. So I'm now, okay, that's interesting, but I've got the visibility of it, of where they're coming from. I now see blocked login, so I can see that, you know, this user tried to log into Box, this user tried to log into Google, but they were blocked. You know, there's a picture here. Why are they blocked? What's going on? What triggered it, etc. I begin, and these are only a couple of the fields that you get from an event in Netskope. There's about 417 fields, I think. The amount of information you can get from it is immense. That now I can set up what are called alert actions. So say, for example, I do see a login here coming from reverse proxy, and we know for a fact, as a company policy, you cannot log into Google Drive unless you've got a Netskope client running. We've blocked everything inside of Google. Even if you did log in via reverse proxy, you can't do anything, so you won't see anything, but there is a login attempt there has been made against Google from someone that is essentially trying it without a client on the machine. Then I would set up an alert action to go. I wanted to just highlight that, but because I'm in edit mode in the dashboard, it's just going to draw it. But I would create an alert action that will go and disable that user's account. So it'll do that in Okta, or it'll do it in Google. It will go and turn off that user's account. So within, you know, seconds of it being discovered, the login attempt has been logged with Netskope. It has now appeared in Splunk. We'd set a threshold where it's very quick to get that data. Then Okta is going to disable the user's account in Google, which means that if that is a legit, someone has actually been phished, we've stopped it within seconds of it happening. So we've gone from a stage, before all the Netskope and everything, the thing I said at the very start of the call, that the customer said all they can really do is train their users and hope for the best, that they don't get caught. Well, we've now went through that. We're training our users with KnowBe4, so training them in a structured way, and we can test if they're susceptible to phishing by sending out test campaigns, seeing the reports and results that come back, and getting visibility as how good our training is and where to focus on who might need a bit more training. Then we've blocked all the risky categories. So even if a user fell for the phish and they clicked on the link, they're not going to get anywhere because they're blocked. But if that link is categorized incorrectly as legitimate, they're hiding it behind something, we're blocking the login attempt. So therefore, the user ain't going to get anywhere again. Hence, the credentials are going to stay within the company, only known to the user. Then, if they are completely phished, they've fallen for it, they've sent it to a personal drive, they've clicked the link somehow outside of their machine that's blocking everything. We've now got the reverse proxy that even if they are phished, they can't get into our resources because we're blocking it if they're coming in without a client running. We've got the threat detection hooked into our Google Drive. So if they do upload a dodgy file, it's going to be caught, could be quarantined, could be moved away, instantly deleted, and the user informed as to why their file was deleted. We've also got the power to stop users logging into things, registering for things with their company details, stop them from using personal Google Drives and so on in case they download something dodgy from there. The visibility we've got now of it all happening means that if it does happen and we detect it, we can instantly take action. We're seeing that it is happening when we might not know that it's happening before. Now we can see it's happening, what's happened. The users tried to log in here. We can see it's all broken down by activity, the user, the time, etc., the country they came from. That we've now got an alert action that if we fully, I mean, these are just very quick dashboards I've made here, but if we fully integrated this properly with some thought as to where users should be going, knowing their behavior, what they're up to, then we can take action immediately the minute that our triggers are hit that we think we've been phished, as opposed to waiting to find out that we've been phished as our entire IT system goes down and we end up in the BBC News because hundreds of devices have now got this crypto locker on it. We can stop phishing. And that's just some food for thought, just on the topic of phishing. As I said, Netskope is massive, so it's absolutely massive what you can do in it. There's way more. I've got a bunch of videos on the Somerford YouTube page. If you go to YouTube, search for Somerford Associates about all the DLP and things like that you can do. One thing to touch on, just as we close, the behavior analytics side of things is fantastic, because I only looked at compromised credentials, but it does actually look for other things like distance. So it happens all the time when I'm logged into like this box here, because this VM that I was on is probably based in Ireland. In fact, it's not Azure. I don't know where the AWS data center is, but when I'm in Azure, it comes up as Ireland that I'm coming from. So if I log into Google Drive on this, and then I log into Google Drive from my Mac, and I'm sitting here at the moment in the UK, then I do get a distance flag comes up, and it says that there is absolutely no way that you could be in the UK and get to Ireland by the time that you logged into both of these things. And it will flag it saying it's a speed of sound check. You've traveled faster than the speed of sound, that if you've been phished, that might happen. So if someone logged in at 9 a.m. in the morning and they used their account, they got phished at 10 past 9, and then a user logged in from a different country at 20 past 9, then it's going to flag that something's iffy is going on here. But we can set all that up using the Splunk and the alerting and stuff like that, make it a bit more malleable to what we might need to check on and so on, and create those alert actions as well to disable the account. And that is just some food for thought on how you can use a tool like Netskope and KnowBe4 as well. Think of KnowBe4. Implement the Opta, remember, for your SSO and your MFA and stuff like that. The ways that you can stop phishing. You don't have to just hope for the best like a previous customer did. I definitely do look at the information that's out there on your company as to what's being advertised on LinkedIn, how someone could phish you in a targeted way. Can they buy your company email addresses from one of these marketing sites? Can you go on LinkedIn? Can you see all the security tools that you currently have advertised by employees who are posting their CVs and things on there? I don't have a LinkedIn because of various clearances that I've had in the past. It complicates things. But I see a lot of information on there that I would want to know if I was phishing someone. And have a look at your login screen for these cloud apps when they allow you to customize it. Because there's just one thing I'll leave you with is, whenever I RDP or SSH to a machine inside of a company, there is usually a legal disclaimer comes up, and it says something like, you should only use this if you're authorized, you should only be logging on to this if you're an employee, or you'll be faced with criminal activity and so on. You know, that legal blurb that you put into a GPO or a Unix login script that will say, it will give you that warning. But whenever I go to a cloud login, I never see that. I never see that warning. And all I would do is, like, if I use an example of Somerford, I won't use Somerford actually, I'm not going to advertise what our page looks like, but say I went to Office 365 and I put in my credentials, my proper company credentials, and I hit the landing page, I would put a warning there. I would put a warning on that saying, if the URL above does not match X, do not proceed, or some steps to follow before they hit submit. But most of them I go to, they care about the branding. So like I said earlier, it was a photo of a car and it was a company logo, username and password. So if I recreate that, all I'm doing is replicating what your site looks like. If I wanted to replicate it completely and you've got a little warning on that to your users to say, check the URL, make sure this is legit before continuing, I would have to put that onto my page as well, which to make it exact of what you used to have. I'm making mine look like that too. So therefore the user would still be encouraged to check and make sure that it's a legit logon and blah, blah, blah. So think of things like that to stop the phishing as well. And that is us. We have gone slightly over by 5 minutes, but I hope that some of that was informative and that gives you something to think of to stop phishing in this day and age. Can't say we'll do it 100%, but with those just two basic policies essentially at the secure web layer, I think that you would wipe out phishing in a big way for any company automatically.